They said the trail was closing for the season. Too much erosion, too many reports of fallen branches blocking the path. My job was simple: drive up, take down the old wooden trail signs, haul them back before winter. Easy, quiet, a day's work. It was deeper in the forest than I'd expected. No cell signal from the moment I passed the ranger station. The road wound tighter and tighter until it was more roots than asphalt. My truck groaned at every bend. I thought I'd be alone, out there, and at first, I was. The forest had that stillness that only comes when you're miles from anywhere. No wind, no birdsong, just the crunch of my boots and the creak of old wood as I pried each sign from the earth. Some of them were so rotted they practically came apart in my hands. The names on them were faded, but I could still read the words. Scenic Overlook, 1 mile, Pine Hollow Trail, and one that just said, "Do not enter." That one was nailed higher than the others. Someone had gone to a lot of trouble to keep it in place. I should have left it there by the time the sun dipped behind the trees. I had a truck bed full of weather-worn planks and rusted nails. That's when I heard it footsteps. Not mine, not an animal's, heavy, deliberate, following me through the trees. I told myself it was just the echo of my own movement. But when I stopped, the footsteps didn't, and somewhere deep in those woods, something else stopped too. I haven't told anyone this before. Not really, not the way it happened. I've given pieces of it away in casual conversation, little fragments, but never the full story. Honestly, I think if I did, most people would just chalk it up to fatigue or an overactive imagination. But I know better. I know what I saw, what I heard, what followed me home. You seem like someone who's seen strange things too, or at least someone who wouldn't laugh in my face. That's the only reason I'm telling you this now. It's been gnawing at me for weeks, and I can't keep it in anymore. I need someone to listen, just listen, without trying to explain. In a way, it started with the forest job, the one I told you about. Removing old trail signs. It was remote, the kind of off-grid where you lose cell service long before you reach your destination. I'd been there before, years ago, on a summer hike. Back then, it felt peaceful, alive with sound. But this time, it was different. It's hard to describe that kind of silence unless you've been in it yourself. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty, like the forest was holding its breath. I remember stepping out of the truck and just standing there for a moment, waiting for something. A bird call, a gust of wind, but nothing came. Only the crunch of my own boots and the groan of wood as I pried the signs from the earth. The cabin I stayed in wasn't much. 1 room, bare wood walls, a single bed that sagged in the middle. No signal, no TV, no radio. Just me and the dim glow of a lantern I brought from home. At first I thought the isolation might be nice, peaceful. I hadn't realized how much city noise had been buzzing in my head until it was gone. But that first night, I started hearing things at first. I thought it was the normal shifting of an old building, wood popping, wind slipping through the cracks. But the sounds were too deliberate. Footsteps on the porch, slow, heavy, pausing, every few seconds, like someone was standing just outside the door, listening. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was nothing. But the next morning, I found dirt on the porch, not scattered, placed. 2 footprints, deep, in the dust, facing the door. I should have left. I know that now, but it's easy to make those calls in hindsight. Back then, I told myself it was just an animal, a trick of the light. Anything but what it really was. That second day, I worked later than I should have. The sun drops fast in the forest, and by the time I was loading the last sign into the truck, the trees had already swallowed the light. That's when I heard it, those footsteps again, somewhere between the trunks. Not rushing, not stumbling, just following. I turned, expecting to see someone, another hiker, maybe a ranger, checking on me. But there was no one there, just shadows between the pines. stretching longer than they should have. By the time I made it back to the cabin, the night had settled in thick. I bolted the door, set the lantern on the table, and tried to convince myself it was over. But it wasn't. I didn't sleep. Couldn't. Every time my eyes closed, I heard movement outside, sometimes circling the cabin, sometimes stopping right under the window. Once I swear I heard something drag its hand along the wall. The worst part, I kept thinking about that one sign, the one that said "Do not enter," the one nailed higher than the others, like it was meant to stay there forever. I keep wondering what trail it was meant to block, and whether I'd already walked it without realizing. You need to promise me something. If you ever find yourself in a place like that, a cabin in the woods, no signal, a silence that feels like it's listening to you, don't stay, don't explore, don't give it a reason to notice you, because once it does, it doesn't stop. Even if you leave the forest, it finds a way to follow, and when it follows, it doesn't just watch, it waits. The cabin was smaller than I'd imagined. I'd been expecting something like the rental shacks near the state park, those with chipped paint, faded curtains, maybe a welcome mat that had seen better days. But this one looked older. The wood was blackened in places, not from paint, but from age and weather. The roof sagged just enough to make you feel like it was breathing with the wind, even though there was none. The door had no lock, just a sliding bolt on the inside. The windows were single-pane glass, the kind that rattles if you touch it. There was no power line running to it, no generator humming nearby. Inside, the air felt cooler than outside, almost damp, and it carried the faint smell of moss and something metallic like old coins. I dropped my gear onto the table. The table itself leaned to one side, as if one leg had been gnawed shorter than the rest. The chair in the corner had deep scratches along the seat, too high for an animal, too deliberate for where. The ranger who'd given me the job hadn't said much, just pointed at a hand-drawn map, told me where the signs were, and warned me that the trails past Pine Hollow weren't maintained. His eyes had lingered on me a little too long after that, like he wanted to add something else, but didn't. I figured it was just small-town caution. Outsiders get lost, and the forest doesn't forgive. But on the second day, when I stopped at the gas station before heading back out, the cashier, a woman in her 60s, with white hair pulled into a tight braid, asked where I was staying. When I told her, her smile faltered for just a second. She said, "You'll hear them. Don't look out the windows when you do." I asked her what she meant, but she just rang up my coffee and turned to the next customer. Back at the cabin, the stillness had settled even heavier than the day before. Not a single bird call, no rustle of leaves. I set my lantern on the table and went to check my watch. It had stopped at 2:17 p.m. I thought maybe the battery had died, but when I checked my phone, dead too. Not low battery, just off. It wouldn't turn back on. I glanced at the clock on the wall above the bed. Its second hand was frozen. The strangest thing was, I could hear a clock ticking, somewhere, faint, almost under the floorboards. It wasn't in sync with any of the clocks I could see. That night, I sat by the window, looking out at the tree line while I ate. The forest looked different in the moonlight, the shadows too long, the trees seeming closer than they had during the day. My reflection in the glass caught my attention for a moment. I wasn't moving, but I swear I saw it breathe. Just one shallow rise and fall of the chest. I tried to tell myself I was tired, that my eyes were playing tricks, that the footsteps I thought I'd heard the night before had been nothing more than the creak of the porch under the weight of cooling wood. Still, I slid the bolt on the door earlier than usual. Around midnight, I woke to silence so deep, I could hear the faint ringing in my ears. My eyes adjusted to the dark, and I realized the lantern had gone out. I reached for my phone to use the flashlight, forgetting it was dead, but when I picked it up, the screen flickered to life on its own, just for a second, long enough to show 2:17 a.m., Exactly 12 hours after my watch had stopped, I set the phone down and froze. The ticking sound was back, louder now, closer, and that's when I saw movement in the window's reflection, not outside, not in the room, but in the reflection itself. A shadow, leaning forward, like someone was standing just over my shoulder, looking out into the woods with me. I didn't turn around, couldn't. The ticking stopped, and the forest seemed to lean closer. That second night, I made the mistake of thinking I could wait it out. Just one more night, I told myself. Finish the job, drive out in the morning, and never think about this place again. I even tried to laugh at how paranoid I'd been, but laughter feels different in a place like that. Hollow, like the walls are listening. I bolted the door early, set the lantern in the center of the table, and tried to distract myself by reading the one paperback I'd brought along. But the words wouldn't stay still. I'd read a sentence and forget it instantly, my eyes sliding back to the page as if I'd never read it at all. That's when the knocking started. It wasn't loud, just 3 soft taps against the wood of the cabin. Not the door, the wall, low to the floor, like someone was crouching there. I froze, listening. The knocks came again. 3 taps, then silence. I told myself it was an animal, a branch, anything else. But then it came from the opposite wall. Same rhythm, same distance between knocks. I waited, my heart thudding so loud I was sure whoever or whatever was out there could hear it. The knocks circled the cabin, wall to wall, slow, deliberate. By the time they reached the front door, I was gripping the lantern so tightly my knuckles ached. I didn't move until they stopped. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because the next thing I remember was dreaming. In the dream, I was outside the cabin, walking the trail with the "Do Not Enter" sign. The forest felt too still, the air thick like I was walking underwater. I could hear footsteps behind me, but every time I turned, the path was empty. Then a voice low, almost a whisper, spoke my name. I woke to find the lantern still burning and my mouth dry, as if I'd been breathing too fast in my sleep. The strangest part, my boots were damp. Mud clung to the soles. I hadn't left the cabin. The third day blurred into itself. I went out early to take down the last few signs, keeping my eyes forward, ignoring any shape or shadow between the trees. When I got back to the cabin, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The chair in the corner was turned toward the bed. I hadn't left it that way. I tried not to think about it, but that night the knocking didn't come. Instead, I heard the door handle jiggle. Slow, steady turns, as though someone was testing the lock from the outside. The bolt held, but each time the metal scraped against the frame, I felt my body tense until my muscles ached. The handle stopped, and then the door opened. I sat up, certain I'd locked it. But there it was, swinging inward just an inch, enough to let the cold air seep inside. I stood, pushed it shut, and slid the bolt back in place. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely fit it through the latch. That night, the dream came again. Same trail, same silence. This time, I didn't turn when I heard the footsteps. I let them come closer. When I finally looked, there was something just out of focasa. Tall, thin figure, its head tilting in small, unnatural increments, like a bird watching prey. It didn't move toward me. It didn't have to. The forest around it bent slightly, like the trees were leaning closer to hear whatever it might say. And then it whispered something I couldn't understand. When I woke, my heart was pounding, but I wasn't in bed. I was sitting in the chair in the corner, facing the bed. The fourth night, I barely slept at all. Every creak of the cabin felt like footsteps. Every shift in the wind sounded like someone whispering my name. At one point, I swear I heard breathing right outside the window, slow, steady inhales that fogged the glass. I didn't look. I couldn't. When the lantern flickered, I saw movement in its glow. The table had shifted just a fraction, but enough for the legs to scrape the floor. I sat frozen as the chair beside it turned slightly, as if someone invisible had just sat down. The lantern went out. In the dark, I heard it again, the ticking, not from the clock, but from inside the room, right behind me. I made it until dawn, without moving, the gray light finally pushing the shadows back. That morning, I told myself I'd finish the job and leave, no matter what was left undone. But when I stepped outside, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Every trail sign I'd removed was back in place. The nails were rusted, the wood weather-worn, but they stood exactly where I'd found them days before. Even the D.O. not enter sign, high up on the post, staring down at me like an accusation. That night, I didn't dream. At least, I don't think I did. But when I woke, I was lying in bed with the bolt on the door open and mud across the floorboards. My boots were by the door, clean, and in the reflection of the window, there was a shadow in the corner of the room. Too tall, too still. It didn't move when I turned around, because there was nothing there. But in the glass, it was still watching me. By the fifth night, I wasn't pretending anymore. Whatever was happening here wasn't just in my head. I had stopped trying to sleep in the bed. Instead, I sat at the table with the lantern, keeping my back against the wall so nothing could come up behind me. My eyes roamed the room again and again, looking for anything I'd missed. That's when I noticed the floorboards near the chair in the corner. They were different, narrower, the wood darker, and spaced just slightly wider apart. I don't know why I hadn't seen it before. I set the lantern down, got on my knees, and ran my fingers along the gaps. One of the boards moved under the pressure. I wedged the claw of my hammer between the plank and the beam and pried it up. Beneath, there was a small, hollow space. Inside was something wrapped in oilcloth, stiff with age. I pulled it out and unwrapped it carefully. It was a journal. The leather cover was cracked and flaking, and the first few pages had fused together with moisture. The handwriting inside was cramped, hurried. I flipped through, and the words made my stomach knot. They are not animals. They knock to count you. They walk to measure you. The signs are not for hikers. They are boundaries. Once they follow, they never unfollow. Do not take the signs. The entries went on for pages. The writer spoke about them like they were always just outside the walls, patient and unblinking. About trails that appeared and disappeared. About reflections that moved on their own. One entry, dated 30 years ago, was written in a shaking hand. They came inside last night. I heard them breathe. I heard them sit in the chair. I think they can speak now. They know my name. I sat frozen, the journal heavy in my hands. Because the night before, I dreamed of the voice whispering my name at the very back. An entry was carved into the leather itself, pressed so deep the letters nearly cut through. Burn the signs. Burn the cabin. Don't look at the reflection. I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until I let it out, slow and shaky. My eyes went to the window, to the pale reflection of my own face in the glass. I told myself not to look. But, of course, I did, and I saw it again. That tall shadow, standing just behind me, its head cocked to the side. The outline was clearer now. Longer arms than a man should have, fingers that nearly reached the floor. I turned. Nothing but the journal was gone from the table. Panic burned through me as I dropped to the floor, searching under the chair, under the table, even in the hollow where I'd found it. Nothing. My pulse was pounding so loud I didn't hear the sound at first. A slow, steady tapping, not on the walls this time, but on the glass of the window. I looked up. The shadow was closer now, pressed against the other side of the glass. No features, just the impression of a face, leaning toward me. Its hand, impossibly long, tapped 3 times against the pane. I backed away until I hit the wall. That's when I heard the voice. Not in a dream this time, but here, in the cold air of the cabin. Low, rasping, and almost human. Do not leave them. I didn't understand, not at first, but when I looked toward the door, I saw them. Every trail sign I'd taken down was stacked neatly inside the cabin, wet with dew, smelling of the forest. The "Do Not Enter" sign was on top, the letters deep and dark, like they'd been carved yesterday. I thought about the journal's warnings. Burn the signs, burn the cabin. But the voice hadn't told me to burn them. It had told me not to leave them. I didn't know if obeying would save me or damn me. But I knew one thing. Whatever was outside the cabin had been here long before me, long before the person who wrote that journal. And it was patient enough to wait long after I was gone. That was the moment I stopped thinking about finishing the job. The only thing in my head was getting out, but the forest had other ideas. I waited until the first gray hint of morning before I moved. My hands shook as I shoved the signs into the bed of my truck, each plank heavier than it should have been. The "Do Not Enter" sign went in last, and even touching it made the skin on my arms prickle like I was holding something alive. I didn't bother checking the cabin one last time. I just climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and felt a wave of relief as the engine roared to life. I told myself I'd drive straight to the ranger station, leave everything there, and never come back. But the road wasn't right. I followed it exactly as I had the first day down the winding dirt path, past the turn where the pines grew close enough to scrape the sides of the truck. But after 15 minutes, I passed the cabin again. I don't mean it looked like the cabin. I mean, it was the cabin. Same sagging roof, same leaning table, visible through the window. The signs I'd loaded into the truck bed were gone. But when I glanced at the porch, they were stacked there neatly, waiting. I tried again. This time I turned left, where I'd turned right before. The trees seemed to shift, bending overhead, until the sunlight was gone, even though it should have been morning. The air grew heavy. Still, I drove faster, certain that if I could just break through the tree line, I'd see the highway. Instead, the road ended, not in a clearing, but in another wall of trees. Thick, tangled branches rose higher than I could see, their bark slick and dark like wet stone. I reversed, heart hammering, only to find the road behind me was gone, just more trees. It took me an hour to admit I was trapped. The forest wasn't letting me out. I left the truck, thinking maybe I could walk my way free, but the air was different here, colder, sharper, as though I'd stepped into a higher altitude. And then I heard it again, that slow, deliberate knocking. Only now, it wasn't on wood. It was on the ground. 3 dull thuds, spaced evenly, like something enormous was pressing its weight into the earth. I turned in a slow circle, searching the shadows, and that's when I saw them. Between the trees, just far enough away to blur into the dark, shapes, tall, thin, swaying gently, like they were breathing with the forest. I don't know if they had faces. I didn't want to know. When I finally stumbled back to the cabin, the door was open. Inside, the chair in the corner was pulled out from the wall, angled toward the table, and on the table was the journal, open to a page I hadn't read before. When you understand, you will stop trying to leave. They do not keep you here. You keep yourself. I stood there for a long time, reading that line over and over, until the words stopped making sense, and then I sat down in the chair. It felt right. The ticking started again, but now it was inside my head, matching the rhythm of my pulse. The forest outside didn't feel threatening anymore. It felt expectant. I think I slept, though I'm not sure if sleep is the right word. I drifted in and out, my thoughts turning over like leaves in a slow current. Somewhere in that haze, I heard the voice again, closer now, almost kind. Do not leave them. When I opened my eyes, it was dark again. The lantern was lit, though I didn't remember lighting it. The signs were gone from the porch. I don't know where they went, but I think I do. I don't remember leaving the cabin, but I must have. The next clear memory I have is standing in my own apartment, days later, with the sound of the elevator in my building chiming from down the hall. 3 soft dings. Even patient, I haven't been back to the forest since. But sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I catch my reflection in the window, and there's still something standing behind me, watching, waiting. I haven't been able to sleep since that week. Not really. I close my eyes and maybe, for a few minutes, I drift, but then I hear it. That same 3-count knock, sometimes faint, like it's on the other side of a wall I can't see. Sometimes, so close it feels like it's coming from inside the mattress. I tell myself it's nothing, just a sound my mind's invented to keep the fear alive. But some nights, it's louder, clearer, like it's checking to see if I'm still here. I've tried moving, twice, different towns, different buildings. I got rid of everything that reminded me of that forest, the maps, the boots, even the jacket I wore. But it doesn't matter. I think once you take something from that place, or maybe once it takes something from you, you can't undo it. Sometimes I wonder if I ever really left. If this apartment, these streets, if they're just another loop of the same trail. Maybe that's why the knocking always comes back. You seem like someone who listens. That's why I've kept talking this long. Maybe, if I hand some of this weight over to you, it'll feel lighter. Or maybe it's just the opposite. Maybe telling you is a way of passing it along. I still think about the journal, about those words carved into the leather. Burn the signs. Burn the cabin. I didn't do it. I left them there. I wonder if that's why it followed me, because I didn't finish what someone else started. Once in a while, I dream of that clearing, the "Do Not Enter" sign, nailed too high for me to reach. The forest around it, leaning closer, like it's waiting for me to try again. In those dreams, I never touch it. I just stand there, staring, until the shadow steps into view. I've stopped looking at my own reflection for too long. In windows, in mirrors, in anything with glass. Because sometimes it isn't me looking back. Sometimes it's taller. Sometimes it sways. I'm telling you all of this for a reason. If you ever find yourself in a place like that, a cabin in the woods, no signal, a silence that feels like it's listening to you, leave. If you find a trail that feels wrong, even if it looks perfectly normal, turn around. And if you ever see an old sign that says "Do Not Enter," don't touch it. If you do, and if something starts following you, there's no getting rid of it. Don't go looking for answers. Don't try to finish someone else's job. That forest doesn't give answers. It just takes things. And even the ones who walk away aren't really free. If you ever find that place, burn it. Don't stay. Don't explore. Don't write anything down. Just watch the fire and pray it doesn't remember your name. Because if it does, you'll hear the knocking, and once you do, it already knows you. Before I stop talking, I need to ask you something. Have you ever been somewhere you couldn't explain? Somewhere that felt wrong, even though it looked perfectly normal? Maybe you heard something that shouldn't have been there. A knock, a whisper, a footstep when you knew you were alone. If you have, tell me. Write it down below. I'm not asking because I'm curious. I'm asking because maybe, if we put the stories together, we can start to see the shape of whatever's out there. Maybe we can understand what it wants. Or maybe we can warn someone else before it's too late. Just if you do tell me, leave out the exact location. Don't give directions. Some places aren't meant to be found. And if you've already heard the knocking, if it's ever been 3 knocks, slow and steady, then you know why I'm saying this. Because once it knows you, it doesn't forget. I'll read every story you share. I have the time. Sleep isn't something I get much of anymore. And maybe I'm not the only one who needs to hear what you've been through. But if you do write it, don't read it back out loud. Especially at night. Especially if you're alone. And whatever you do, don't listen for the sound. It's closer than you think.